they get the scene number and they get an audio sync.
That's like an anchor to see.
Yeah, because it's really hard to sync audio up in the post. Okay, so we can start.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. The next is a podcast that is looking into technologies and how they disrupt our lives and the way we work. Today's theme is machine learning and artificial intelligence in health sector. If I had a penny for every time someone told me about artificial intelligence and machine learning in the past 2 years, I would actually be rich enough to fund a company doing research into that. A recent study by Forbes actually found out that marketing and sales team prioritize AI and machine learning over any other enterprise today. Predictive analysis, data mining, data storytelling, and something known as advanced algorithm for data discovery are the most highly prioritized projects in these companies, and the amount of money they spend is tremendous on this research. And 2009, there was a study by Data Science and Machine Learning Market Study, and they found out 40% of their study pool, which consisted of around 200 organizations in the US, they critically relied on machine learning based model for their day-to-day business. So it's huge, it's no more theoretical anymore, right? And if we go back into the history and look at the funding, how these companies got funding in the past and was the trend changing now, in 2018, there were 8,000 something startups registered at Crunchbase with AI as their core business. And they cumulatively raised $9.3 billion, which is 73% more than 2017. That's a tremendous jump, right? And similar trends are being seen now in 2019, where Q1 and Q2 reports are already higher than the same quarter one, quarter two reports of 2018. So the point is, like, these are not small companies, or these are not just research-based companies anymore. These are products which have real-life implications, and they're changing the way how we perceive technology and how we interact with them, whether it's in diagnostics in health, whether it's in recommender systems in purchasing and marketplaces, or whether it's supply chain optimization. It's everywhere. But today on the show, we are going to talk about AI and machine learning in health sector, its barriers, its opportunities, and how it can help better diagnose diseases. For this, I'm very happy to introduce to our guest, who is a scientist, academic, and an entrepreneur. He's deeply interested in artificial intelligence and biological neural networks. He did his undergrad from Rome III, the University of Rome, in Bachelor's of Philosophy with specialization in artificial intelligence and artificial life-based approaches to cognitive sciences. Then he pursued his PhD from University of Amsterdam, in which is a very complicated topic, which I'm going to say now, that is computational underpinnings of human risk decision making and memory process.
Perfect.
Okay, great. And then, as if this wasn't enough studies, he went ahead and his postdoc and actually created a new idea to learn a language, which with his colleague Ian Cameron, he created into a solid product. He has been intertwined with the Berlin startup scene, with the Helix Cognitive, someone I have worked with before, and he was the head of data science with cybersecurity and distributed ledger technology. But we are here today to talk about his new venture, which is on which I'm really interested, that is Nostos Genomics. And he's the head of machine learning to deal with genomic data. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you.
Really nice to have you.
Nice to be here.
Let's get down to the heavy stuff. But before we do that, can you please tell me what is genomics?
So, genomics, or let's say genetics data, is the kind of information you get when you do, for example, an exam of your DNA repertoire. So basically, it's the genetic repertoire, which is for every human.
Right. And what can we get from this data?
So, one of the major advancements, I would say, in scientific discovery was the sequencing, which is how you read out the gene of the human genome. This means mapping out all the single components. You can think of it as an alphabet, so different letters, which make up as human. Why is so important? Well, once we have this baseline, you're actually able to see where there are mistakes, let's say, in the coding. So a way to see this, that in your DNA, in your genes, there is all the instructions which then when you grow up, basically it tells, let's say, your cells how to reproduce, what to produce. What is important is that many conditions for health might have and definitely have a genetic base, but at the current state that we are, something like 99% of the human genome is unknown, in the sense that we don't know the impact it has on the health condition. And that, I would say, is where there is most importance or most to gain. Like, we only know 1%, but already being able to know a little bit more of what this 1% will mean for your health condition might provide a treatment for many people who, for example, go undiagnosed.
So let's then come back to Nostos Genomics. What does Nostos Genomics do?
So Nostos Genomics focuses exactly on this problem, in basically trying to make sense of the genomic data that you have for each individual. And make sense means providing a better understanding for both the patient, in the sense that he might know what are the underlying causes, let's say, of a physical condition he has, but also for the doctor. Because before you can propose a treatment to anyone, you have to know whether the base of your disease or your condition is genetic or something else. As we are now, a large proportion of people who have a genetic disease, as I said before, are either undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. So what Nostos Genomics is focusing on is increasing the number of patients who can receive a diagnosis for genetic diseases, and from here providing a way to move toward a personalized treatment in that sense.
And this is really interesting. So where do you see the future of, how does machine learning come into Nostos Genomics? What is the role of machine learning in this?
It's an interesting question, especially because, as you said, nowadays you hear a lot about AI, self-driving cars, fantasy runs wild. But it's true that there is some concrete achievements. What we do, so basically what we do is the machine learning approach that we have help us to spot pattern and dependencies in the data. So in a sense, you can think of it as a mapping problem. You have a set of information and you want to find what of this information, of these features, tell you more about, let's say, the condition of a patient. So in that sense, machine learning gives us a way to synthesize, extract more information from a large data. It's important to note that this data is very vast, but it's very sparse. So you have very little information here and there, and that's where the machine learning approach really shines. Although that's only part of the approach of Nostos Genomics, because what we do is, from our machine learning models, we derive these predictions, but then we also go in the lab and actually do our tests to see if the predictions make sense. And in this kind of circle, we basically leverage on synthetic biology, which is what we do in the lab, and machine learning to basically gather more and more information regarding genomics data.
I got, let's say, most of it. But I think it's an important question, and this has been my experience with a lot of people. They don't really understand what machine learning actually is, or what is the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning put together. So why don't you tell me, what is machine learning for you, for someone like me who doesn't know anything about machine learning?
So I'll give you, I'm very happy you asked this question, because also find often there is some misunderstanding, but I would say my formation is an academy, so this is how I read it from the book. Artificial intelligence is the broader field, where actually is the idea that, I think it goes back to Shannon, maybe even before the term, to program a machine, a computer, I think, to play chess. That was the first idea. And chess because it's a complex faculty. Within artificial intelligence, there is a number of subdomains. Machine learning, I would say, is one of the subdomains. And there the idea is, how can I write a program with a set of instructions to teach a machine to do a task. That's, for example, one part. And nowadays, I think, since machine learning has seen these dramatic advances and breakthroughs, the thing has been a little bit equated, so AI and machine learning gets interchanged.
In the same boat again.
Exactly.
And what do you think is driving this crazy growth in AI and machine learning? And you read that sometimes it's the technological advancement, but you also see now a lot of boot camps, a lot of data camps where people are actually getting into this hardcore with theory, and that's really good. That should happen, but why suddenly? What do you think it happens so quickly and now it's a wave?
I think multiple things came together at the same time. So on the one hand, there was major theoretical advancement, which enabled some let's say deep learning systems to be trained. The seminal paper came from Hinton, who actually showed how you can train this stack of neural networks. So that was theoretical advancement. But at the same time, this was coupled with a dramatic increase in high performance computing, GPU computing. So sure, you can have, the math and the system to do the super fancy model, but if you don't have a computer who can do it in a reasonable time, you won't have any use for it. And the third part, which I think makes this application much more powerful, is connectivity. So, for example, Alexa from Amazon, it's a case in point because I think he leverages also from fast connectivity, where I think most of the heavy lifting is done on their cloud services. And when all these things came together, I think it's where we saw the explosion and this major revolution. Deep learning, for example, and Google in general has shown, we're going beyond winning a chess, which was already achieved, I think, in the late 90s.
The AlphaGo, right? Yeah, AlphaGo was an impressive feat. I saw the documentary and I was like, okay, this is beyond what I can understand right now.
And also in that sense, what I appreciate is that with the whole endeavor of AlphaGo, actually what they ended up having is the key to success for them is having a system who could play with himself. So that is, in essence, the principle of artificial intelligence, because in a way it's a synthetic agent who is simulating with itself many games to find the best strategy.
So can I put it this way, like saying that artificial intelligence is actually not smarter, it just simulates the same human life again and again and again till it becomes better or learns more efficient ways because it has theoretically more time to experiment?
Yes.
Can I put it in like really simple terms?
That is correct.
That is correct. And how would it be different from machine? Because machine learning, it learns from data. And it could be supervised. Someone could actually tell him, okay, hey, this is the right one, you need to look for this. Or it could be unsupervised.
Yes.
So what kind of machine learning data models does Nostos use? Is it supervised learning, or you just give a bunch of data to the computer and like, hey, figure it out?
So the way we use actually is a mixture. We basically leverage on the expert of our, on the human expert level knowledge. From our CTO. She's a trained geneticist, and therefore we, together with her knowledge, we then embed some of this knowledge in the machine learning model. So then it's partially supervised, but partially unsupervised. Normally what you would do is you take a model, you give him an initial training set to learn basically the categories and the labels. Afterwards, you present a new data set. Usually the new data set doesn't have labels, and you ask him to guess or predict. We follow exactly this kind of approach, where after the training then we expose to the model, present to the model new data and ask him to tell us a specific genetic variant or mutation, whether it would have a most likely beneficial or be harmful for the patient, basically, pathogenic or benign.
Okay, so I will come back to Nostos Genomics at the end again, but now let's get into the present state of machine learning and AI penetration in healthcare. Before this, I sent you some videos, and they were very interesting. That is the first I saw of them. The twerps was really interesting. The early predictive stage for diseases, which gave them hourly predictions on when this particular disease is going to happen. What do you think about these technologies, and how do you think they're going to change the way medicine is handled right now?
I think the change is going to be dramatic, and it's going to be way more than I can imagine. So it really resonated with me, one of the two talks about sepsis in the TED Talk. So there the problem is not that the doctors didn't find the right treatment, it's just they found it too late.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I really see the major revolution bring about by machine learning, in the sense that it will create time when actually there is none. So by providing doctors with the information they need before, this will help to, well, not saving a lot of lives, but on a massively larger scale. There I see a lot of improvement to be made. Similarly also for the other case with Path AI and diagnostic of breast cancer, I liked very much, and I think Nostos Genomics will stand from the same perspective. You can already have a system, an artificial system, who is either equal or better than a human expert at diagnosis. But their achievement was when you had a combination. So giving to a human doctor the speed and access to high-level information, another pair of trusted eyes, I think the speaker was saying, this gave them the best benefit. And that's, I think, where machine learning will really shine, where it becomes more and more integrated with human expert, doing their expertise in that sense.
This is very interesting for me because my father is a doctor and he's an old school doctor. He has learned his techniques through actually physical examination, and he relies a lot on them, which is very different from doctors now. They rely a lot on diagnostic data, they rely a lot on labs, and not actually physically examining the patient. So my question again was that machine learning is not going to replace any of the doctors or any of these chief places where actually human consultation is required, right? But theoretically, machine learning can predict better at every given category.
Yes and no, I would go.
Okay, so what would be your no? Where would be like, okay, this technology is an iffy, we really need an oversight on this.
So I think definitely, let's say the case of the breast cancer or radiology, when it's vision, I think machine learning is really superior to the ability of a human expert to discriminate. Also because a machine learning model never gets tired. So but it can become quickly problematic where, for example, the data is sparse, so there is little data. So what I gathered and I saw from working in the genomic space now is actually the experts have to collect data and actually come up with a prediction. So come up with a sequence of data points or pieces of evidence who justifies an interpretation or another one. That's very much similar to Sherlock Holmes solving a crime.
That's a good analogy.
And that's where I think there is a sudden transformation. Well, we need to do more with the machine learning models we have. One of the criticisms you often hear is that machine learning models are kind of black boxes. This means they can be great at predicting, but it's really hard sometimes to know what is driving the prediction. I think this is extremely important for the medical sector because you need to be able what is driving this prediction regardless of whether it's correct or not. And that's where I think the human expert, the human component cannot really be replaced. But my vision, and I think also my colleagues at Nostos, I'm sure they will agree, it's the integration of both which really brings you forward.
I think I agree to that as well. I think I read this interesting report on the Tesla factory complete automation, which actually slowed them down. So the best combination what they realized was actually automation plus human beings, because machines can actually do everything, but some humans are just faster at doing some things because of the tactility of the thumbs and everything involved. So, and then they had to roll back. They have to remove some automation and put humans back in. So this is an interesting case point for 100% automation, which I understand and also agree to, because you can, at the stage of robotics right now, you can actually see some machines taking a lot of time just to perform a simple task because they're just not there yet. But on the other hand, you see Boston Dynamics, who are making robots that can perform acrobatics. This is just two different spectrum, right? Now the question comes down to, where is this interface between research and actual application? Because ultimately it has to trickle down to commercial viability, right? I think now they're saying that, okay, AI is in bubble, machine learning is a bubble, drones just collapsed, the market for drones just collapsed because, okay, a lot of companies invested on it, but there's not enough market. But I don't think AI is a bubble. because we see its application every day. Google with its new predictive email typing, and it's scary because they know exactly what I want to type next.
Even before
even before I think. So it's like, okay, dear David, I'll see you there in 5 minutes. Like, this is just insane. But this is also very helpful. Sometimes I don't want to write a lot of emails. I can just select the predictive text. So where do you see this interface between research in medical sciences and actual commercialization of it?
It's an extremely interesting question. So I was thinking, reading also in light of this podcast, I was reading online about what is the latest application cases. So some of them definitely seems to me they have a high high marketing potential, but not very applicable because the cost benefit ratio is just too high. So yes, having an autonomous robot who can do a very complex task might sound appealing, but it's probably not that efficient because the task is complex and we are not there yet.
Right.
So this is to say, in short, that I see most of the gain is actually where there can be a large gain with a very unsophisticated AI. So we have self-driving prototypes of self-driving cars. That's very, very advanced. I would say already having, let's say, a predictive algorithm who can tell you most likely what is your condition given the health records, as I saw in TEDx, that's already where you gain most of the advantage. When you move to industry or to application, well, that's a case in point because with very little technological advancement, you can actually, in that case, save more people. So the gain you gain at a very concrete level is large, given a very relatively little technological advancement. So that's where I see more of the research leading to practical changes in the industry. Especially because this maybe links a little bit before to what we said before about AlphaGo. One difference, I don't know exactly, but if AlphaGo follows in the same, a human expert, let's take chess. A human chess expert doesn't have infinite memory. Actually, the human memory is very limited. 7-8 items in the short-term register. What human experts do, like master chess players, they abstract over many games and they actually are able to spot general patterns in the chessboard, which will tell them intuitively, I'm going towards this kind of game or that kind of game. Humans excel at abstraction to a level where I think AI has only started scratching the surface. The AlphaGo model, in that sense, well, one, because he had infinite memory. In this sense, this is a way to say that the smartest machine is not necessarily the best advancement. So we tend to work with infinite resources. And that's a little bit, well, it works in some cases, but not in others.
I agree to that. So my next question is, this is something that I have faced with my company. This is, I think, Europe specific. I don't think it applies to every other place, but policy framework in Europe. What is the policy regarding data, how you can use it, and how are you overcoming these barriers which have been put in place with these really strict barriers, and then you can't really jump them off because it's in sort of in the area of gray and illegal. So how are you navigating through this intense GDPR issues? Where do you get your data from, and how does it happen? Like, it's really complicated process.
So it's absolutely a complicated process, especially because we work in the space of software. So our software, since it's for medical purposes, follows under the regulation of software for medical purposes. So it has to satisfy a number of criteria, including GDPR. In our case, the data, since we work closely with labs who do diagnostic and general sequencing of DNA data, we get our data fully anonymized, fully compliant with GDPR, and depending on the lab, sometimes we actually get our data physically. So we absolutely don't do anything on the cloud in terms of data processing unless it's anonymized, and this is a way to protect the identity. Also, as part of this procedure, once we have trained our model, we only keep our model trained in the cloud. This means it's almost impossible to reverse engineer the data after it has been digested, so to say, by the model. For all the other regulations, also, well, our software will have to be validated. I don't know exactly who is the regulatory organization here in Germany, but it will have to go through, like it would be in US FDA approval.
Okay.
Because it will be for medical purposes.
Right. And so yours is a B2B business, or you also plan to extend to end user, where someone like me can actually just go through maybe a Nostos Genomic booth and get full data on my medical history, maybe get something from my previous doctor, because here everything it's on computers, you get that history. Is it also a plan for expansion where an end user can interact with your company?
So this would be a good question for the CEO, because we discussed about it before, but I don't think there is any plan yet, but the idea is for now we focus on working on the labs, because there is already companies working in the space of these large platforms.
Right.
However, that could be a future way of expansion where actually we would also focus on doing the entire pipeline. But it's not really set on stone yet, because it's a space which is moving really, really fast. Things change really, really fast.
Right.
So also, there is no point in reinventing the wheel if someone invented a very good wheel.
Exactly.
I think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We always chase around tail doing, oh, maybe we can do it better.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, what is that one thing that you think that this technology is going to radically change in health sector, or maybe from your past experience in neurosciences, where you think, okay, you know what, no one is looking into it right now, but the future is this when people get in. I would also like to bring into now your maybe, I don't know if you've heard about Neuralink from It's in such an amazing technology, and I saw the robot that actually does the surgery. It was just insane. Do you know how it actually learns the position of the capillaries in your brain, and it predicts the next movement according to your breath. And in between that window, it injects the neuron, the link. And this is just amazing. It's so amazing that it's out of the practicality realm for me.
Yes.
It's something out of the sci-fi. And where do you see this going?
Well, that's a very nice example, I would say, of a cyborg.
Yeah.
And cyborg is really the integration of into a circle of human and machine in a closed loop. Looking at the AIs who are there now, they are very sophisticated machines. But to me, the next step is where actually, there is this closer integration, almost in a symbiotic kind of loop between the machine and the man.
Right.
Even further than that, when we will start to have systems who actually show signs of cognition. So cognition means, I would say an android from the best TV sci series.
Okay.
Data from Star Trek, Next Generation. That's where you see really the big achievement. So in the medical sector, like my maybe a little bit utopic view for the future is a doctor will be supported by a synthetic doctor who will together with him actually work on a case. So it will be really having a self-sentient agent next to you. This of course then brings, what are the limits of these AIs?
Right.
What would be the regulations or the robotic laws following Asimov? But that I think is where there will be the big change. And the example Neuralink, to me, it's paramount in that sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's possible to program cognition to that level to embed awareness in a machine.
Right.
But definitely a good approach is actually to learn from the brain, and we learn a lot of functions from there. And probably by integrating it, we will get us closer to understanding how to develop this kind of cognition.
Right. That gives us a nice segue into ethics.
Yes.
It has been a very discussed topic, ethics around AI. Will AI take over the world? And how do you actually train a machine to understand between the wrong and right? It is actually very important, because there are military drones and military equipments being developed which are really relying on computer vision to identify between enemy and not enemy. And this brings into a question, who validates this, right? Because as everyone knows in software, garbage in, garbage out. Who's actually designing this? Who's putting in the parameters? And who's in control of this really complex machinery? And it's often not the people who understand how this works.
Yeah.
So where do you stand with ethics in AI, and how does Nostos Genomics deal with the future problems of ethics which might not even have been discovered? What's the mechanism in place?
Again, excellent question and a tough question, this one. I personally stand that some decisions, I take it from an ethical point of view. So the example that you make with the weapons, but it, to me applies also to self-driving cars, where the car has to distinguish: am I running over a pedestrian, or am I seeing a reflex?
Right.
Some of these choices, because they are inherently moral, cannot yet be made by a machine. So my stance is that a human, there would be an observer always who has to make the call. Also because if you make the machine make this kind of life-death decision, who then is liable if the machine does a bad decision? The machine itself, the creator?
Excellent question, yeah.
And at Nostos, I mean, we discussed this because we work with a software who does diagnostics.
Right.
And now the way we like to explain is that we don't provide the decision-making system. We provide a support tool for the decision maker. So the tool we're going to provide will provide high-level information to a doctor, to the patient itself, but to a human decision maker, because ultimately the choice should be made by a human and not from a machine.
Right.
Said this, I like to still speculate as a scientist how it could be in the future. How could you teach a machine morality? Well, if one way of thinking of it is pitting against different machines, and then having them experience in a controlled environment good and bad behaviors. How do we learn morality ourselves as humans?
Yeah.
I would argue we get exposed to a number of signals from our parents, from our communities. But this is a very careful topic also because...
Definitely, yeah. So there was this interesting case on, I'm quoting Reddit, it's not the most scientific place, but Reddit has some interesting stories. So there was this question someone posted that, okay, if it's a self-driving car and it has to decide between a baby and an old lady, whom does it run it over in a driving test? So there was a lot of speculation, and then there's this one guy who says, were you ever asked this question in your driving test? So if you are not tested on your morality and you're only tested on your driving skills, why are you testing an AI for doing the same? Right? Because if you took a driving license exam, no one tested your morality, they just tested your skills. If the same thing was applied to a self-driving car, and if it can park, parallel park, maintain lanes, maintain speed and do it, why would you test it on a higher level of morality? It was an interesting conversation. Some people agreed to it, some people don't, but it always comes down to this. We are always holding technology to a higher standard of security, or maybe a standard of criticism, which is good, because unlike people, technology can be used by anyone. Right? So I think that's ethics is a very complicated topic when it comes to AI and machine learning, right? So I would like to give you this space to talk about Nostos and maybe make a small advertisement. I would like you guys to see David's work. He also writes, and he's an academician. You can also find his papers. I will put the link somewhere, I'm sure. And for now, it's David.
Okay, thank you. Let me start by saying this. Like, I worked for many years as a scientist. I really like what I did, studying fundamental neuroscience, but then I became increasingly, and this is very personal, a little bit frustrated by sometimes the speed at which some of the things you do in science then crawl back in the real life to bring real benefit. So then I really felt like, no, I need to start moving faster because this is driving me nuts. And now that I work in Nostos Genomics, where we really focus on patients, so actually that I have to say was really rewarding. I'm gonna say a few things of what we do, but it's more why I think I like what I do rather than why everyone should come and check us out.
I think that's important. You must like what you do.
I still have a lot of passion for it, and I'm really happy about it, because not only I think as many is not, I'm not saying that it's the only startup. There is a number of great startups out there. I can only speak for the one I work with. The team is excellent, very nice people, but also it's a company who focuses on the patient side. And that's what attracted me in the first place, like doing something with the latest, technology we can master, or anything we have at our disposal to bring benefit to the patient. And again, when I was confronted from some of the numbers, like only less than 1% of the human genome is understood for its implication, like that's a disarming low number. Like I would have guessed 10%, no, 1%. And to me, it told me, oh, there is a lot to do. And also, since I always been super fond of machine learning and AI, and I started studying before the big hype, I always thought, oh, what is the next challenge? What's the next problem? And I thought, well, genomics seems to be something I don't understand, but it seems very hard problem. And that's where actually, we met with the founders of Nostos Genomics, that I was looking for the next big challenge who would give me this extra satisfaction to help others in a more concrete way. And they were looking for someone to actually combine with their synthetic biology and business model. And that's where actually I think it's a really genuine company with something really good.
Okay, great. So I would like to close this by saying it has been an interesting journey for me to learn about artificial intelligence. I was introduced to this when I actually moved to Germany, and I have taken strides to actually understand this. And it has been wonderful talking to you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving your precious time, and I see you doing great things.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.